The first weeks of captivity were full of tension, silence, and careful glances as hundreds of Japanese prisoners of war were brought through the barbed wire gates of the American camp. Most came in ragged uniforms, with sweat and dirt baked into the fabric after months of battle and surrender. The long marches, the endless dust on island roads, and the non-stop tropical heat had made their bodies very tired, but nothing had prepared them for the strange things waiting inside. After registration, medical checks, and getting basic supplies, they were pushed into a big wooden building with pipes running overhead. The place made many of them stop and stare. The building did not look like anything they had ever seen in the Pacific. Wide rows of nozzles stuck out from metal lines, each with a drain under it. The American guards, quick and strict, motioned for them to strip and get in line. For the first time, many understood they were not just being held. They were supposed to wash. Among the prisoners, confusion spread like a small wave. Bathing for Japanese soldiers during the war was rare, often done in rivers or the sea, and always limited by lack of supplies. Soap was seen as a luxury, yet here, in the hands of their sworn enemy, they were being guided to a clear routine of cleaning. Some held their things tightly, as if expecting a trick. Others whispered nervously about the steam coming from the pipes. They remembered stories told by their officers before surrender, that the Americans were cruel, that capture meant shame, and that prisoners would be treated worse than animals. Now, looking at the shiny metal showers, they wondered if this was some hidden punishment. The guards, annoyed by hesitation, shouted orders in English and pointed again. Shoes, belts, and tunics all had to come off. One by one, reluctant hands, clumsy buttons, and bodies marked by jungle battles stood uncovered. The prisoners felt exposed, embarrassed in front of strangers and each other. Still they obeyed, holding the bars of soap placed in their hands. Then came the hiss of water. From the pipes above, streams of clean water flowed hot to the touch. The sudden heat shocked the men. For a moment they froze, expecting pain. Instead, as the water ran down their backs and shoulders, washing away layers of dirt, a strange calm came over them. Some closed their eyes, letting the dirt swirl down the drains. Others rubbed carefully with the rough soap, as if checking whether it was really allowed. Slowly, the first fear turned into quiet wonder. They had not felt this warmth and freshness in months, maybe years. In the islands where they had fought, water was limited, showers did not exist, lice and sickness rampant. To step under a stream of hot water with no buckets, no shouting officers, and no limits was almost unimaginable luxury. Here, in enemy hands, they were cleaner than they had ever been in their own army barracks. When they came out, towels waited for them. Thick cotton towels stacked neatly. Many prisoners touched them as if they were treasures from another world. They dried themselves awkwardly, not used to such soft fabric. For the Americans, this was normal camp routine. For the Japanese, it was amazing. They walked out, hair dripping, skin pink from the heat, and a quiet murmur of surprise moved through them. The fear that had held them when they first entered the shower hall was replaced by confusion. Had their captors really given them comfort instead of cruelty? That first time in the camp showers stayed in their minds for a long time. It was the start of many surprises that challenged everything they had been taught about the enemy. The experience was not just about washing off dirt. It was about seeing the difference between what they had been told and what they actually experienced. The modern showers with endless hot water and soap became a sign of something bigger. The thought came that being captured might not mean shame or suffering, but a strange look into another way of life. When the first showers ended and the prisoners went back to the barracks, a heavy silence filled the room. They sat on wooden benches, some holding their folded uniforms, others rubbing their hair with the thick towels, still unsure if they had been given a gift or faced a hidden danger. Many avoided looking at each other as if talking might break some unspoken rule. Deep inside, though, worry gnawed at them. They had been warned many times that capture by Americans meant shame, torture, and death. In secret briefings before battles, Japanese officers had painted pictures of cruel enemy camps where hunger and abuse waited. Yet here, the first thing done to them was bathing with soap and hot water. To many it felt strange, too kind, too civilized. One prisoner, a former naval mechanic from Yokosuka, remembered how Allied propaganda leaflets had shown smiling prisoners getting food and rest. He had always thought those papers were lies made to lower Japanese morale. Now, standing clean for the first time in months, he remembered those pictures with a chill. Could some of it have been true? But another thought came into his mind, darker and scarier. What if the showers were not for cleaning at all? Rumors spread quickly, especially among those with sharper memories of wartime propaganda. Some whispered the words gas chambers, thinking about vague stories of Germans in Europe. Even though few knew the details, the idea that Americans might use showers for some secret cruelty spread quickly in quiet tones. The guards noticed the hesitation. They watched groups of prisoners stop at the doorways, faces full of mistrust. Orders were repeated, and translators explained in broken Japanese that bathing was just required hygiene. But suspicion did not go away easily. For men trained to believe surrender was worse than death, any act of comfort seemed like a trick. They wondered if the soap given to them was poison, or if the hot water hid something evil. Some even refused to wash properly, only wetting their arms and backs before stepping away. The cultural differences made the moment even harder. In Japan, bathing had strong cultural meaning, tied to ritual cleaning in hot springs and shared baths. But the war had taken away that tradition, leaving soldiers unwashed for weeks, full of lice, fighting constant infections. The camp showers, by contrast, were built like a machine. Rows of steel pipes and drains worked without privacy, running like clockwork. To the Americans, this was just practical hygiene, nothing else. To the Japanese, it felt strange, mechanical, almost dehumanizing. It was a ritual without its spiritual meaning, turned into something functional but unsettling. For days, prisoners talked about the same questions. Why would Americans spend hot water on captives? Why give soap, towels, and time when they could leave them dirty? Was it really kindness, or part of some bigger plan to break them mentally? Theories grew in the dark barracks. Some said the showers were a way to control prisoners, softening them with comfort. Others whispered that chemicals might be in the water. Fear stayed, pushed by memories of warnings from officers. Yet no punishment came. No hidden cruelty appeared. The men went back to the barracks at night, still alive, still breathing, cleaner than before. Slowly, suspicion began to fade, replaced by quiet, careful curiosity. The Americans repeated the same routine the next day and the day after. Soap was given out again. Guards made sure every man went into the shower hall, and still nothing bad happened. Suspicion stayed, but now it mixed with another feeling: confusion. What kind of enemy would care if prisoners smelled clean or had fewer lice? For men raised to believe capture was a fate worse than death, the thought was as unsettling as the showers themselves. The daily routine of hygiene soon became part of camp life, though at first it felt forced on the Japanese prisoners. Each morning or evening, depending on the schedule, guards lined them up and marched them to the shower hall. At the entrance, they got soap wrapped in paper, smelling strongly of chemicals, unlike anything from home, and towels often stamped with military supply marks. The routine was mechanical: strip, step under the streams, wash fully, dry, dress, and go back. But as days turned into weeks, the prisoners began to see that this was not temporary. Cleanliness was a rule, a discipline enforced just like curfews and roll calls. The Americans explained hygiene rules through interpreters, showing with gestures how to use soap properly, insisting that men scrub not just their arms and faces, but their feet, hair, and hidden folds of the body. Lice checks followed, done by medics who looked through clothing seams and bedding. Delousing powder was given along with clean underclothes. For the first time, many Japanese soldiers realized that the enemy treated disease prevention as seriously as they treated food or weapons. To the Americans, hygiene was not a luxury, but a necessity for order, health, and discipline in the camp. For the prisoners, this routine brought a strange mix of shame and fascination. On one hand, they were stripped of individuality, made to wash on command like schoolboys. On the other, they learned that life without constant itching, sores, and infected wounds was surprisingly better. A corporal who had fought on Guadalcanal remembered weeks when his unit bathed only once in muddy streams, while tropical ulcers spread among his comrades. In contrast, after just a few weeks of enforced showers, the sores on his legs started to heal, and the long cough that bothered him faded. It was a quiet, clear improvement, an irony that hurt his pride. Language problems caused confusion at first. Many prisoners did not understand when guards shouted about washing hair or scrubbing feet, so they did only the bare minimum. When they tried to skip steps, they were forced back under the streams, watched until the soap lathered properly. Some were upset by the interference, muttering that it was embarrassing. Yet even in their resistance, they could not deny the results. Their uniforms, washed regularly by camp rules, no longer smelled like rotting cloth. Blankets smelled lightly of detergent instead of sweat and mildew. The barracks, once full of the smell of unwashed bodies, became more bearable, even for those who never said it out loud. Slowly, the feeling of suspicion changed into habit. Prisoners started to expect the routine, lining up with less resistance. They learned to scrub more carefully, dry themselves properly, and fold the towels as they were told. Some even compared the soaps, noticing which ones lathered better or smelled less strong. It was a small thing, but for men with no freedom, these little comparisons became a way to talk, a way to pass long hours of boredom. Hygiene changed from a rule into a shared routine, something that quietly connected them together. What surprised many most was realizing that their captors wanted them to keep dignity even in captivity. Being forced into showers and given soap was not just about stopping disease. It was about keeping a certain standard of humanity. In the Japanese army, soldiers had been taught that comfort was weakness, that suffering through filth and pain was honorable. Now, under the control of their enemy, they were shown that regular washing could be part of discipline, just like carrying a rifle. This clash of values made them uneasy, but it also planted the first seeds of careful respect for the strange, strict order of their captors. The first time hot water poured over their shoulders, many Japanese prisoners kept. Some even stepped back as if it burned them. The warmth, steady and controlled, came from the overhead nozzles in a way they had never felt before. For men used to washing in cold rivers or buckets, the feeling was almost like luxury. The steam rose fast, curling in the air and softening the harsh light of the barrack-style room. The soap, strong and foreign, foamed thickly on their skin, lifting away months of dirt. They rubbed it carefully at first, then more strongly, amazed at how the lather stayed and rinsed off easily. For some, the moment was too much. They remembered that during long campaigns in the jungles, officers had warned them to save every drop of water, that cleanliness was less important than survival. On distant islands, baths were rare. Soldiers wiped with rags, their skin always sticky with sweat, salt, and dust. The few times hot water was heated in cans or drums were rare blessings, shared among dozens of men. Here, though, each prisoner stood under his own warm stream as if such luxury could last forever. It was not just bathing, it was stepping into another world. The towels given afterward made the experience even more shocking. Thick and absorbent, they were not like the thin cloth soldiers had used in Japanese barracks, where men often had to share rags. Prisoners pressed the towels to their faces, smelling the faint chemical scent of detergent. Their skin felt fresh, pores open, the sticky tropical film finally washed away. It was more than just physical relief. It brought back feelings they had hidden for a long time. Some remembered family baths at home, memories of mothers filling tubs with hot water before the war took over their lives. Others thought of public bathhouses, now distant echoes of a civilian past. The camp showers brought back these feelings, but now mixed with the strangeness of being a prisoner. The Americans treated the routine without emotion, giving soap and towels with the same direct efficiency as food rations. For them, it was just procedure, disease prevention, morale, and order. Yet for the prisoners, it became a quiet revelation. The irony was sharp. They had expected cruelty, yet here they found comfort beyond what they had ever known, even in their own army. Some felt shame, thinking such comfort made them weak. Others accepted it quietly, thankful for a moment that let their tired bodies feel human again. Over time, the showers changed their daily life. Instead of just scratching lice or ignoring sores, they learned that hot water eased pain and helped healing. Their hair, once greasy and tangled, became soft and easier to comb. The smell of sweat on their uniforms went away, replaced by the faint sharpness of soap. Even the air in the barracks became lighter, less suffocating, as regular bathing reduced the smell of so many bodies living together. Prisoners began to notice these changes with surprise, quietly realizing they were healthier than during combat. The paradox troubled their minds. How could the enemy, whom they were taught to hate, give them care their own army had denied? The showers were not just about being clean. They showed a system so organized, so full of resources, that it could give comfort even to prisoners. Standing under the streams of hot water, they could not help feeling both envy and unease. It reminded them how different this world was from the one they left, and how far Japan fell behind in giving its soldiers even basic dignity. At night, when the barracks were dim and long rows of prisoners lay on their cots, conversations often went back to comparing life with the Imperial Army. The topic was not weapons, not battles, but the strange discovery of hygiene. Men who had marched across Burma, who had fought in the jungles of the Philippines, now whispered about soap, towels, and the shock of hot water. It was not the kind of topic soldiers thought honorable, but the difference was too clear to ignore. In the Japanese military, bathing had been rare, carried out when possible. Officers talked about endurance, ignoring the body's discomfort, and seeing filth as a sign of toughness. Soldiers often went weeks without washing, their skin covered in grime, their uniforms stiff with salt from dried sweat. Lice and fleas lived in clothing seams, tropical ulcers spread, untreated. The smell of unwashed bodies stuck to every march, every camp, every night in the field. Complaining about it was seen as weakness, not worthy of a true warrior. Yet in these American camps, cleanliness was enforced, as if it were a law as important as discipline itself. One prisoner, a former sergeant, remembered out loud how his unit in New Guinea had shared a single rusty basin of water for 30 men. They had rinsed their faces and hands, but there was no real bathing. He compared it bitterly to the endless streams of hot water in captivity. Another man said that back in Manchuria, his regiment had suffered frostbite, not just from cold, but from wearing the same dirty socks for months. Disease had damaged whole units more than bullets ever did. Now here in America, every man scrubbed his feet every day, and medics checked for infection as if they were valuable patients. The irony was sharp, and it stung. This realization spread quietly through the camp. Even men who held on to pride could not deny that their bodies were getting better. Rashes disappeared, lice vanished, sores healed. Stomachs that had twisted from parasites now felt better with regular washing and clean clothes. Prisoners began to see that these improvements came from the routines they had once resisted. For the first time, they understood that hygiene was not weakness. It was strength, a weapon against disease stronger than stubborn endurance. The lessons were not only physical, but also cultural. Many remembered the old traditions of communal baths in Japan, onsen in the mountains, wooden tubs in village homes. Bathing had once been part of life, tied to family and ritual. War had taken it away, leaving men living in dirt. Now in captivity, the enemy had returned what their own army had denied. The paradox confused them. Some talked about it with longing, remembering mothers heating kettles in the evenings. Others stayed silent, ashamed that it was not Japan, but America that had given back this dignity. The guards did not understand why this was so shocking. For them, hygiene was practical, part of rules in public health. They gave orders without feeling, never guessing that the routine showers had such deep meaning for the prisoners. But inside the wire fences, men lay awake, staring at the rafters, realizing that the very military life they had known was wrong. It was not strong to live in filth. It was not honorable to ignore disease. They began to wonder, if America cared this much for the health of prisoners, how much more must it care for its own soldiers? The thought was uncomfortable, but impossible to ignore. Weeks turned into months, and the hygiene routine that once felt strange started to become part of the daily rhythm of captivity. Every man knew the schedule: wake up, roll call, meals, and at certain times, the walk to the shower hall. What had once caused suspicion now became almost expected. The guards did not have to shout as loudly, and the prisoners no longer moved with so much hesitation. They walked in, steady lines, soap in their hands, towels across their shoulders, as if it had always been this way. The change was not just physical, but also mental. The Japanese soldiers, without their weapons and their cause, had gained something unexpected, a piece of dignity. Their uniforms, washed regularly, no longer smelled of decay. Their cleaned and checked bodies were free of lice and infected wounds. Even the small puddles after rain reflected healthier faces, cheeks less thin, skin less scarred by sores. It was an improvement none could deny, even if they never spoke about it. Cleanliness began to mean more than just survival. It became proof that they had not been completely reduced to shadows of men. The effects spread through the barracks, coughing went down. The constant scratching of lice-covered scalps disappeared. Blankets smelled lightly of soap instead of mold. Guards sometimes remarked with a smirk that the Japanese prisoners looked more orderly than when they first arrived. Some prisoners, embarrassed by this, still resisted inside, believing the routine was meant to weaken them. Yet the truth was clear. They felt stronger. Their wounds healed faster, their sleep was deeper, and their energy, though still limited by captivity, became steadier. For some, this change brought pride instead of shame. They started folding towels neatly after drying, polishing boots more carefully, and keeping the barracks clean and orderly. It reminded them of old traditions at home, of the careful routines of Japanese households. Cleanliness, they realized, was not submitting to the enemy. It was taking back pieces of themselves, pieces buried under mud and chaos of war. Even conversations changed. Men once too tired to talk now shared quiet comments about the strange feeling of being refreshed and the irony of being healthier in captivity than in the field. American medics, practical and unsentimental, kept records of these improvements. Fewer cases of dysentery, fewer infestations, fewer deaths. For the Americans, it was proof that the system worked. For the Japanese, it was an awakening. They could not help noticing that their captors treated hygiene as a matter of discipline and respect, not a privilege, but a rule. This lesson made them uneasy because it was so different from their own military ideas, where living in filth was a badge of honor. Here, the opposite was true. Cleanliness was order, and order was strength. Over time, the suspicion that once stuck to the showers almost completely disappeared. Men no longer whispered about poison in the soap or hidden cruelty in the water pipes. Instead, they started to look forward to the warmth, even to crave it. The routine became something to enjoy, a moment of physical relief in a life without freedom. Some prisoners stayed under the streams longer than allowed, closing their eyes and letting the water pour over them, as if it washed away not just dirt, but memories of defeat. In the quiet of these routines, many learned that hygiene was more than a rule from the guards. It was a way to restore dignity, a way to feel human again, even inside the barbed wire. It was a subtle, clear change, one that affected not only their bodies, but also their understanding of what it meant to endure. By the time autumn winds blew across the camp and the days grew shorter, conversations among prisoners had changed. No longer were there whispers about poisoned soap or hidden cruelty. Now the talk was about a different kind of wonder. The understanding that daily routines of soap, hot water, and towels were not accidents of captivity, but signs of something bigger. In the dim barracks where men sat cross-legged on their bunks, they began telling stories about their first experiences with the showers, laughing awkwardly at their own fear, and amazed at how normal it had all become. One prisoner, once a strict infantry officer there, admitted that when he first entered the steaming room, he thought it was a trick meant to kill them. The others laughed at the memory, shaking their heads, though many said they had felt the same fear. Another man, younger and talkative, compared the camp showers to the big public bathhouses in Tokyo he had visited as a boy. This brought quiet murmurs of nostalgia, and the prisoners were for a moment taken back to a world of tiled floors and wooden buckets, to evenings when families and neighbors shared warmth together. The irony struck them all. It was in enemy hands that pieces of those memories came back. What shocked them most was not the showers themselves, but what they showed about America. If this country had enough resources to give endless hot water to prisoners, what must it give its own soldiers? If soap and towels were shared here so freely, what comforts must be waiting on bases back home? The difference with their own experiences bothered them. They remembered comrades who died from infection because there was no clean water to wash wounds, soldiers who marched with lice eating into their scalps, men who wasted away not only from hunger, but from the slow damage of their bodies by dirt and disease. To see that the enemy cared so much about hygiene made many prisoners quietly admit, though never too loudly, that maybe this was one of the secrets of American strength. Conversations became more open around the mess tables while eating rations of bread, potatoes, or beans. Some spoke openly about their shock. They admitted that before capture, they had thought Americans were cruel beasts. Instead, they found them to be orderly, careful, even in something as simple as bathing. Others went further, saying this showed a whole civilization built on plenty and efficiency, one that had the resources to give such care even to its enemies. These ideas started debates because not all prisoners wanted to admit such hard truths. Pride was still strong, and many bristled at the idea that America was better. Yet the proof of their own clean skin, healed sores, and better health was clear. For some, the realization felt bitter. They muttered that this comfort was meant to weaken them, to take away the endurance that had once defined Japanese soldiers. Others felt something else, a quiet respect. They started to see the showers not just as hygiene, but as a window into the huge resources, industrial strength, and different thinking of their captors. In quiet voices, a few even admitted that the experience had changed how they imagined the world outside the wire. So the showers, once feared as tools of cruelty, became moments of learning. They were no longer only about soap and water. They were about the sharp difference between two worlds and the understanding that the enemy's power came not only from weapons, but from systems so advanced that even prisoners were included in their care. Years later, when many Japanese prisoners returned home after the war, the memory of captivity stayed complicated, filled with shame, relief, and confusion. Yet among the many memories in their minds, one image stayed very clear: the showers. Men who had fought on distant islands, who had seen comrades die in jungle ambushes and naval attacks, remembered most of all the feeling of hot water pouring from pipes, the soap foaming in their hands, and the strict routine of cleanliness that first shocked and then changed them. Some former prisoners told their families, awkwardly describing how Americans made them wash every day. Their wives and mothers listened in disbelief. How could an enemy provide such care? Others stayed silent, not wanting to admit that captivity had given comforts greater than their own army had. Yet in private, many accepted that the hygiene rules in the camps had changed the way they saw the world. The memory of endless hot water stood as proof of a civilization different from their own. Modern, plentiful, and organized in ways that Japan, despite its strict discipline and long traditions, could not match during the war years. The memory was not sentimental. For the prisoners, showers had been strange, embarrassing, even scary at first. But over time, those feelings changed. As disease went away, as wounds healed, as lice disappeared, the idea grew stronger. Cleanliness meant strength. They realized that health was not a luxury, but a tool, one that America used quietly but very effectively. In barracks conversations after they returned home, some admitted that this lesson was maybe the most important thing they brought back, not about fighting or tactics, but about the power of modern living standards. Historians who later interviewed them noticed how often showers were mentioned. Unlike food or work, which could be different in each camp, the hygiene routine was nearly the same everywhere. It left a mark deeper than rations of bread or cigarettes. Men who had been starving in the field could handle small camp meals without surprise. But to be given soap and towels, to be led into rooms full of hot water, this was unforgettable because it was so completely different from their war experience. It did not mean indulgence, but showed a whole different way of thinking, one where even prisoners were treated as humans who should stay clean. The long-term effects stayed quietly with them. Some former prisoners, once back in civilian life, kept the habits they had learned in captivity. They washed more often, always using soap, even when it was hard to get. They taught their children that hygiene was a rule, not a sign of weakness. For them, the camp showers were not just routines. They were lessons, discoveries carried for decades. Looking back, the memory was bittersweet. It reminded them of defeat, of surrender, of being prisoners. But it also reminded them of survival, of unexpected dignity given by an enemy they had been told to hate. For many, it was a paradox that defined their war. In the very moment of shame, they had seen a kind of modern life they could not forget. The showers were not just water and soap. They were about learning that cleanliness, order, and care, even in captivity, could change the way a man understood his place in the world.